Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Soul Talk. I am so happy. I am your host, Rabbi Zevi Weinberg, and I am joined with, I'll actually ask him to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Steve Roth from Nicaragua.
Steve is very, very humble. The truth is, I'm pretty humble too, if I may say. I should give myself some credibility. I am the blogger and author of KabbalahWisdom.org. And just started a new podcast. Really excited about that. It's called Your Daily RX, Daily Dose of Jewish Mystical Inspiration. Check it out. As well as the fact I've written about 20 books on Jewish mysticism. He's so humble. He was actually a personal trainer to Madonna and Chuck Norris and many, many superstars. And he is just, I wouldn't say living the physical dream. He's living the spiritual dream. The Baal Shem Tov says we are spiritual warriors. And that's actually why I asked Steve to join us. Steve, by the way, our program is loved. People that get this, they really gain so much. And we were learning, we are partners. There's something called jnet.org. I really recommend you check it out. You can get, that's how Steve and I hooked up. You can get a partner. He's in Nicaragua. I'm in Overland Park, Kansas. You can get a partner that will study with you free of charge. Now, if I may say, to get a guy like me, if I may say, I'm a rabbi, I've got written 20 books, but here you're getting real rabbis who are donating their time just to study an hour a week with you, or a woman. It could be what's called a rebbitzin, a lady who's a scholar. So this is an amazing opportunity. Check it out, jnet.org. But as I was studying with Steve, as so often, I often get more out of those sessions than I give. And he gave me an amazing example, a way that he lives his life, which really, he says, oh, I was just saying what you were saying. I said, yeah, but, they say the story about a lady comes to the rabbi. Says, Rabbi, you got to help me. My kid went nuts. What's the problem? He wants to become a rabbi. He says, but I'm a rabbi. She says, no, but he really means it. So Steve really means it. He's the real deal. So Steve, share with us your perspective on life, because I think what you told me yesterday really inspired me enough to hunt you down. And it was difficult to get this interview. So please share.
The rabbi and I were talking about the Yetzer Hara, and he was talking about it, and he was explaining it in a way that I could follow it, but it was a little difficult. And I listened to what he said, and I said, I feel the same thing, but let me tell you what I think, how I think of it.
Steve, can I back up? Some people might not know what the Yetzer Hara is. We would say the Yetzer Hara is a demon. It's like a negative angel force that implants negative ideas and challenges your positive ideas. Is that like what you're thinking about?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And Rabbi, continue a little bit more. I'll catch up with you.
Well, yeah. So basically, I'll just give the basic concept, and then Steve will say his idea. But the basic concept is you are one being with multiple consciousnesses. You have a brain, and basically the brain can think for itself, but it also receives input. It receives information from different sources. So if your hand is hurting, your brain knows that. But your brain also receives messages from God. I'm not going to go too much into it. I'd like to hear what Steve has to say. And it also receives messages from evil. And one of the great ways to see this being true is whenever you want to do something good, you get another idea. It's like, maybe do something else. And it doesn't say like, oh, maybe go kill someone. No, it says like, maybe just do something else even good. And it takes a long time to be so aware of your thought process. You're like, hey, why did that thought just come to me? Steve, because you asked me to speak, so I'll interject with the story because it's a really good story. And that story goes like this. There was a great rabbi, Nochum of Chernobyl, and he was like dirt poor, and he was very kind, and he gave everyone money and all this kind of stuff. And he had a shamash, like I guess you can call him an administrator. And one day a man comes, a wealthy man, and he offers him 300 ruble as a donation for, I don't know, he's a rabbi, he helps people. So the administrator who saw this got very happy. Wow, we can pay off the debts and all this kind of stuff. And meanwhile, somebody else comes to the rabbi and he says to the rabbi, Rabbi, my daughter's getting married. In those days, you had to like offer a dowry. Even today, it costs a lot of money. And I don't have any money. So the rabbi says, how much money is the wedding? So he says, 300 rubles. He says, oh, that's amazing. God just gave me 300 ruble. And this guy needs 300 ruble. Now remember, what does it cost to make a wedding even today? $30,000. It wasn't like a small amount of money. It was like $30,000. So he's like, oh, that's great. But then he says, do me a favor, come back in 2 minutes. So he comes back in 2 minutes and he gives him the 300 ruble. Meanwhile, later, after nightfall, the administrator came and he was looking for the money. He said, what happened to the money? So he said, this guy, so he saw he was crestfallen. He couldn't pay the debts and everything. So he says, let me tell you something. When that man said 300 ruble, my first thought was, wow, this is from God. God gave me the ability to help this man. Then I thought, wait, 1 second, 300 ruble, imagine $30,000. I should help one person. Doesn't it make more sense? I'll divide it into 6. 5,000 for him, and 5,555, and even 5,000 for me and my needs and my expenses. So he said, I have to think about it. After 2 minutes, I called him back in. I gave him all the money. You know why? Because, and guys, listen very carefully to what I'm saying. It's very important. I realized the first thought was my Yetzer Tov, my good inclination. The second thought was my bad inclination. So you can say, how do you know? Maybe it was a good. He could have helped 6 people. Answer is, where was that thought before I had that thought? Why did that thought come to me now once I decided to give the money? So you see, once you decide to give charity to help someone, then suddenly, it's such a better idea with this money. You could save 6 people. So part of life is becoming aware of your own brain and your thinking patterns and your thought. You have to become aware of this stuff. But Steve, I want to get back to you because you had a beautiful way of looking at life, which I think really can help us in terms of how to deal with let's call it the spiritual war of life. Take it away.
At one point in time, we're all being tested. We're being tested, and this is what I honestly really believe. I believe that God is watching over us, and He has this whole world created for each and every one of us. And He knows everything, and He teaches us a lesson. And we have a professional trainer with us. That's our Yetzer Hara. And he's always testing us. And that's good because he's always testing us in the bad ways. He's, you want the candy? You want this? You want that? And your job is to say no. So when you do pass the test, and he gives you the test and it's personal. It's a personal test that he's trained you for. And once you've been tested, and if you pass the test, and most of us pass the test, because he kind of plans the test so we should pass. And it's just like a dad looking down on us, and he smiles. And he goes, yeah, he did a great job. He did a great job. And sometimes you're aware of the test. And you know you passed it with flying colors. And I personally look up and I go, hey, did you see me? I passed it. I did a great job. Well, sometimes you failed. And you know you failed. You walked out and you said, that didn't really work out the way it's supposed to. And sometimes I turn around and go, hey, I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't do a good job. But I know he's going to give me another test. And he's going to test me and retest me, just like a dad does that loves their children. And that's what I believe. I believe that we're always being tested. He's always watching over us. And every time we pass the test, he looks down and he gives us a kiss. He gives us a hug. He gives us a blessing. And he's so happy. And when we fail, he goes, hey, we're going to test him again. He'll do better next time. I believe he has more in him than we could do. He didn't do good that day, but don't worry. And I believe that he loves us. That's honestly what I believe.
Steve, give us an example, please, if you can, and if you're willing, I know it's personal, of a test that you feel that you passed. And you said, Dad, thank you. I'm proud of myself.
I work in the gym. And I have a girlfriend that I really, really, really love. And I really love her and trust her, admire her. She's like my mom, my girlfriend, my helper. She's everything. And girls come up to me all the time. And they all kind of like, hey, Steve, how you doing? Ba, ba, ba. And it's always being a temptation to like answer back or maybe pursue it in a different way. And I go, no, keep focused. I don't want to do something to someone that I love that I wouldn't want them to do to me.
Right.
I know how much it would hurt somebody
Sure.
if you cheat. And I wouldn't want them to cheat on me. And that's a test that happens a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you. Cool. Well, I think that's very noble. I'll tell you a beautiful story that reminds me of this. And this is what I think is real love. The West, we're like into lust. I have a friend, a really great genius, Yossi Beneshevis. He says, in the West, we call lust love, but this is real love. There was this couple, not a couple, they were young and maybe they were engaged. And the Holocaust happened and they separated and they were looking for each other afterwards. A couple of years, they're looking for each other. Imagine that, God forbid. They really loved each other. And they both thought the other person died. Turns out one day a man who's way older than his looks ends up in Port Elizabeth. And there's a lady there doing an intake. And she looks up and she says, Yankel. And Yankel's like so bent over from all his tsars. He looks up, Rachel, with the two people. The only problem was, by this time, they were both married. So she says to him, listen, you and I, we have to forget that we ever knew each other. See, that's real love, because real love is commitment. Real love is loyalty. Real love is not hurting the people you love. Real love is protecting the people that you love. And eventually, what is interesting, after 50 years, they both lost their spouse, basically almost like within a week of each other. And they lived literally a block away. And none of their kids, their grandkids knew. And they got married. So you see, this is real love. Real love is integrity. You have respect for the other person. And so I think that what you're saying is very true. And today, I want to say something very deep now. We have to respect our own soul. God is our soul. There's no difference between your soul and God. It's like a father and a son. The energy of the father is the son. His soul, it's like his soul came into that being. And so when you will realize that you have a piece of God in you, so what you look at, what you think about, what you do, you're dragging God along with you. You have to ask yourself, am I being loyal to the piece of God that my soul is? And when we elevate ourselves to this better consciousness and understand who we are, and then every time you do something good, like you were saying, you say like, Dad, I passed the test. And the truth is, you really not only passed the test for you, you passed the test for God. There was a great Rebbe. These were great scholars of Jewish mysticism. Someone came into the synagogue sad. He said, you're making God sad. If a child is home and the child is sad, he's going to make his parents sad. You come into the synagogue happy. He said, you're making God happy. So we have to understand that it says, Yaakov chevel nachalosei. Jacob is like a rope. Imagine you're attached, like in the Matrix, you're attached to God. Whatever you're doing, you're bringing God into the mission too. So we have to realize that we hold a soul, a piece of God, and we have to respect that. We have to feel, in a way, empathy for God himself. And when we do that, we'll understand how important our thoughts are, our speech, our action, where we look. Everything in the world now, you're speaking about women, it's temptation. It's a very debased way of basically trying to get to the lowest instincts, and it's sick. And a person has to be stronger than that. We're better than that. So that's my 2 cents on what you said.
There's always tests that continue. You walk in and people are not happy and they try to not get you not happy. And the test is for you to produce happiness into this world. And that's also a test of bringing joy and happiness into an environment that's not happy, that people are not happy and people are having a hard day, and you turn that around and you make them happy when they leave and they go, Steve, I feel so much better now. That's also a test. But a lot of times tests happen and you don't know they're tests because it's just so natural. I mean, that was a very easy thing that I talked about my girlfriend, but there were times people said, listen, I'll pay you 2 or 3 times extra if you could work out on Saturday. And I go, listen, it's Shabbos. I don't work out on, well, I'll give you 5 times more if you work out on Shabbos. And I go, I don't do it. And maybe that was a test, but I never think of it as a test because I know it's not a test because there was never a chance of me saying yes. So if I don't have sometimes a test is when you go, let me think about it. It's a temptation. But some things are written in stone and I don't do. It doesn't matter. So I don't think of those things as tests.
I'll tell you, you reminded me of a story, which was a test. There's a guy, his name is Kiwi Bernard. And he's from other things, he's a motivational speaker. So Microsoft, once a year, they have a dinner. And so you can imagine Microsoft, they're willing to get the best. So they wanted to hire Kiwi Bernard. Only problem was it was on Shabbos. So he says, I'm sorry, I can't do it on Shabbos. So they're like, listen, buddy, we'll double it. I don't know, these guys make good money. Maybe a speech, they can make $5,000, $10,000. Eventually, they offered him a year's salary. And he said, that was a test. But he said, no, they moved the whole dinner just for his speech. Now, listen to this. The executives were flying on the plane and they mentioned this to Bill Gates. And Bill Gates says, yes, that's what happens when you have something that isn't for sale. And so this is like a great time to stop and think and ask yourself, what do I have that's not for sale? They say the famous line that a philosopher asked a lady, said, would you sleep with me for $100 million? So she started to think. So he said, what about for 5? She said, what kind of a lady do you think I am? He says, we already established that. Now we're haggling over the price. So and this is a true story that actually I saw with my own eyes. I was in Vegas and there was like one of these kind of diamond conventions. And what happened was this guy, a Jewish guy was there, he's from Australia. There was like kind of the opal stones, very beautiful, multicolored. And his boss was not Jewish. And this guy didn't eat kosher or whatever. But one thing he did, shellfish he wouldn't eat. That was his mitzvah. He wouldn't eat shellfish. So his boss told me I offered him $10,000 to eat a shellfish. And he said no. So you see, that's cool because nobody's going to be righteous and perfect in everything. But we have to have some things that are sacred to us. And if we don't, then it's like we're like that harlot because we didn't have any, the line is here, the line is there. There is no line. But when we know for sure that I am a soul of God, I'm here to do God's will, everything else is just a test. And like you said, what is the test? Not only is it a test to make ourselves and God proud, but it's also a lesson. When you pass the test, you know who you are and you know what the world is 1,000 times better. So I want to conclude with a blessing that the Baal Shem Tov calls us all spiritual warriors. We're all getting tested all the time. The tests are there for our growth. Steve, any concluding thoughts and remarks? And I want to say thank you very much. I know that just coming on here, this show with me was a test and you passed.
Noah, just do the best you can. Just do the best you can and know that your dad, your father, is looking down at you and watching you. And he's so proud of you and he loves you. And you do the best you can, and he's there all the time. He's always there. He's encouraging, he's comforting, he's kind, he's loving, he's everything that you want. Even though sometimes you may not think that, because sometimes dad gets mean and gets strict and wants to spank you a little bit, but he does it out of love.
Basically, he's the best personal trainer that ever existed.
Definitely.
As a personal trainer, you could identify with that, but that's a really good way of looking at God. So thank you. We say thank you to our Father in heaven for being our personal trainer. Each and every one of us, he's our personal trainer. He's growing our minds, our hearts, our sensitivity, our resilience. So let's not look back at life and say, oh, that guy was mean. Let's look at it as an experience that made me smarter, wiser, stronger, better. And in the future, please God, it'll only be good. But if it is bad, we should realize that the bad is only for the good. It says, there's no evil that comes from above. If God is your personal trainer, the only thing that's in it is your success.
Amen.
Take care, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zeph. Bye.
Bye.